Welcome, friends. It's Ray. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today's video features cards I make with the Simon Says Stamps March 2022 card kit. And this kit is full of so much. I love the craft tacky glue. I've never tried the ink, and we get an ink in this kit and so much more. Love the pattern paper. So let's go ahead and get started making a few cards in this video. Here is the first card we're going to make today, and we'll be using circle dies. I am starting with 3 slimline panels that measure 3.5 by 8.25, and I'm going to use one to make a template and then use that template on the other 2 panels. So here I've lined my panel up on the grid, my first panel, and used it to cut out 2 circles that measure 2 3/4, and then I'm lining it up to cut the third circle, and I'm only partially cutting these circles. This is our template with the larger circles. So now we're going to line that up with our second piece of cardstock and use it and a pencil and draw out the larger circles. Okay, and then this will become our second panel or our back panel. And then I will take that same stencil and line it up with my third piece of cardstock and bring in my smaller circle. And that's about 1 3/8. And then I will line it up and use my die cutting machine to die cut all 3 of those smaller circles, and this becomes my top or front panel. After I cut out my partial circles or smaller circles from my for my top panel, then I can start coloring or adding images to my back panel, which is a panel on which I drew with pencil the 3 larger circles. And I just want to contain my images, my coloring, everything within those 3 larger circles. So here's a look at all 3 of my card panels. One is my template for my larger circle. The second is a pencil drawing of my larger circles using the template. And then the third is my cutout of my smaller circles. And I will place that on top, and that will be the top of my card front. So let's get started making our card. And I am starting by using a leftover panel from cutting out a card base. And so I'm using 120-pound cardstock accent opaque. And then now I'm coming in with some Modelon Distress Oxide ink and stenciling some grass into each of those circles. And then I'm bringing in some tumbled glass Distress Oxide
And I'm using a brush that I've used with a darker ink, so this is coming in a little darker, but that's okay. It is going to dry back a little, so it turns out to be fine. But just wanted to point that out to you in case you're thinking this looks a little dark. It is a little dark, but it turns out okay. I have already embossed rabbits, the rabbits from the kit onto 65-pound cardstock, and I have cut those out with my scan and cut. I believe there are matching dies, but I didn't get those. So I've pre-cut my rabbits and using a little alcohol ink to color in the ears and some of the areas on the bunnies, but I do want them to stay white. I'm using a black Pigma um, pen, micron pen, to add some whiskers on the little guy with the carrot. But I end up not using him on this card, and I will tell you why as we go through, because my thought process changed a bit. And here is where I switch out my third rabbit bunny. I want a bunny with his ears going to the left just because the middle bunny, his ears are one's partially up, one's partially down. And then the top bunny, his ears are sticking up. So I didn't want the ears sticking up on the bottom bunny. So now I'm prepping my panel for heat embossing. I want to stamp a sentiment. I'm going to use the Happy Easter sentiment for this card. I did use my anti-static powder bag since I'm heat embossing. I'm using Versa Fine Onyx Black ink and a dry eraser to get a good impression. Then I am going to use just some clear clear embossing powder that I've placed in another jar. And then I use liquid glue to affix my bunnies to my panel. And you can see I've placed an acrylic block on top and then bring in my third bunny. Next, I have stamped another sentiment from the kit, Somebody Loves You, and am just trimming that sentiment out. I had thought that I would split it in half and use half in the center and half down the bottom right. But I decided not to do that. So what I'm going to do is just pop this up on foam tape and place it on my panel. I think this card is shaping up to be my favorite. Let me know in the comments which of the two cards is your favorite. So before I place my second sentiment on my panel, I am going to bring in some Spring Daisies by Buttons Galore and More. Love these, and they come in this pack with two different colors. So I'm just placing one next to each bunny. Used my mono sand eraser to remove a little pencil mark there, and then I also used my rubber cement eraser to remove a little adhesive that had dried in the wrong place. So here I'm bringing in some rhinestones by Daisies and adding 3 of those on my panel. I like to use Ranger Multimedia Matte glue to place my sequins on my card. And so that's what I'm doing here. It has the fine precision tip, and I got a little excess in the wrong spot, so I used my uh, adhesive eraser to remove it and then reapplied more glue and then affixed my rhinestone. And I used my T ruler there to line up my second sentiment and place it on the card. And now I am affixing my panel to my 120-pound card base to finish off this card. Very plain and simple, easy to do, a lot of white space, which I tend not to do, so I had to force myself to leave all this white space. But I love the way this card turned out. I am loving the cute little bunnies in this kit, and I will be making more cards with this kit. So card number 2 is a shaped egg card that I had fun making. So I'm bringing in a stencil, an egg stencil that is from Brutus Monroe. It's older, and I'm not sure I have a source for it. But with this technique, you can really use any stencil in your stash, especially paisley, floral types, but any stencil. And then I am bringing in the seafoam ink that came in the kit. I've inked that, bringing in some picked raspberry distress oxide because this is the only Simon ink that I have. So I want more color, so I'm bringing in other colors that I have. And also using some abandoned coral. So those three colors and blending and overlapping to get more. So I had placed my stencil on just my color palette and spritz it with water, and then um, placed a panel, cardstock panel on top, and just rubbing that to get a neat impression. Here I'm using the largest of the Hero Arts Infinity oval dies, and I have used some low tack tape to affix that to my panel. And I am bringing in my cutting plates, and I'm going to line that up so that I cut everything in this oval except the top because I want that egg shape at the top. So here I've cut all, sorry, that's out of frame there. I've cut all except the top, and I'm just going to hand trim that out with my scissors. I made an A2 card base using my second inked panel and have placed that inked side on the inside, placing the largest of the infinity ovals on the front with some low tack tape and leaving just a little of the left edge outside of the cut area. So, and then I've die cut that. I am using 80-pound cardstock, so I was able to run that through my die cutting machine once and cut, both sides. I place the card base in my trimmer and trim just a slight. Next, I'm bringing in a wavy border die from my stash and am going to affix that to my egg shaped panel with some low tack tape. I make one die cut and then I turn my die over to the other side because it does have stitching and I want stitching to be on my bottom panel or portion of the panel also. So I turned that over and ran that through my die cutting machine as well. So I'm going to set the inside piece aside. Next, I'm going to bring in some clear acetate and die cut my large oval and use that as my the base for my panel. I'm bringing in some dot runner and adding that uh, to the back of my egg and am lining that up and placing it on my acetate. I am using the inside piece that I set aside, using that to help me place my top portion of the panel where I want it to be. And then I'm going to place that on the inside of my card base. I'm using a scrap piece of cardstock and just a pencil to trace out a piece of blank cardstock to put on the top back of my panel to cover that portion up that I had to do some freehand cutting on. Next, I have a piece of scrap cardstock in my MISTI, and I'm bringing in my egg panel so that I can see where I want to place my grass and flower stamps from the kit onto this scrap panel. And I'm using Hero Arts Intense Black ink to do that. And then I will use my heat tool to set that because I am going to use my alcohol markers to color this grass and the flowers. These are small images that won't take a lot of time because there's not a lot of shading involved. So I'm bringing in my Ohuhu number 59 pale green and then my 174 spring dim green markers to color the grass and the leaves of the flower. And for the flowers, I chose an 84 pastel violet, which is a pinkish color, and tender pink, 198. And then for the yellow flower, I used, you can see here I'm testing some yellows. I used 48 yellow green, and then 35 lemon yellow and 37 pastel yellow. The green I just dotted on because on the center, and then I colored that over with some yellow, and just bring in more green to add a little more texture to my grass, and lining that up with my oval panel and then just cutting that roughly. I'm going to come back and trim it a little bit more, but first I want to get it on my panel. So after I get that affixed, I am going to trim it out and then flip my panel over and add some scrap paper. Well, right here I'm adding tape, just regular tape to hold that in place, and then bringing in some scrap cardstock, and we'll use some liquid glue to affix that. And I'm bringing that in so that I level out my entire back side of the panel. I am bringing in some of the liquid adhesive from the kit and placing that on my front panel, and then I will carefully place my egg on or egg panel on top and use an acrylic block to hold that. I have the two bunnies, and I'm using some liquid adhesive to affix the bunny tails to the bunnies, and we'll do that for both sides. I used my tweezers to hold those pom-poms in place or bunny tails in place until the glue set. I am trimming out the sentiment strips that came in the kit. I'm trimming out two of those, Happy Easter and Have an Extra Sweet Easter. I'm going to use the larger one on the outside and the smaller one on the inside. So I have just put some liquid glue on back and am letting that set. And then I have popped up my two little bunnies on foam tape and have affixed those to the front of my panel. I use my scissors to trim off just a sliver of that front panel so that my card will stand. I love the way this turned out. So this card will fit into an A2 envelope, and if you wanted to add some sparkle and shine, you could do that to the front. I like it just the way it is, and I am calling it done. Now let's take a closer look at both cards I made in today's video. And if you like the video, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing if not already a subscriber. As always, thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, good day, friends.